She was meant to watch, not to feel. A Valkyrie's duty was cold and unyielding, guide the worthy fallen to Odin's hall, and nothing more. But the first time her gaze fell upon him, broad-shouldered, blood-streaked, his war cry splitting the dawn, her immortal heart stuttered. Against every law of the gods, she wanted him not as a chosen soul, but as a man. The battlefield was soaked with firelight and screams. Spears glittered like cruel stars beneath the pale morning sun, arrows sang as they arced through the sky, and the iron tang of blood thickened the air. She hovered just beyond mortal sight, her silver armor gleaming faintly in the shroud of mist her presence wove. Her sisters had already descended elsewhere, collecting the spirits of the slain with efficient detachment. But she lingered, wings spread, her eyes fixed on him. His name came to her in a whisper from the threads of fate, Eirika, son of Halvard. Destined to fall before the sun touched its zenith. His fate glowed around him like fireflies, shimmering threads of gold and crimson only a Valkyrie could see. He was already marked. No mortal blade could be turned aside when destiny itself had decreed his end. Yet he fought with such fury, such relentless will, that even fate seemed hesitant. She watched him swing his axe into the chest of a charging enemy, the blow cleaving through bone and armor with brutal grace. His roar shook her chest. He should not have mattered more than the countless warriors she had ferried to Valhalla across centuries. And yet, he did. Eirika stumbled. A spear grazed his arm, crimson spilling down his bicep. The Valkyrie's wings twitched, an instinct rising to swoop down and shield him from what must come. Her throat burned with words she was not allowed to speak. She knew her sisters would sneer if they sensed her hesitation, knew Odin's wrath would be swift if she dared meddle. But her heart had already betrayed her. Not him, she whispered into the storm of steel and screams. Not this one. The mortal could not hear her, yet his head turned briefly, as if some instinct had stirred. His gaze swept the smoke-filled skies, pausing for the barest breath where she hovered unseen. Her chest tightened. Could he sense her? Mortals were not meant to. Yet his lips curved in a grim, reckless smile, and in that instant she knew, he felt something, even if he did not understand what. The battle surged. Shields splintered, horses shrieked, men bellowed their last prayers. She saw the moment of doom spiral toward him, a warrior in dark wolf-pelt armor rushing in with a blade raised high. Fate gleamed around the strike, bright and final. This was the end. Her body moved before her mind consented. Wings snapped open, she descended like a storm, her blade striking the enemies before it could fall upon Eirika. Sparks burst in the mortal realm, unseen by all but him. For the first time in her existence, she had crossed the veil. She had interfered. Eirika's blue eyes widened. The enemy stumbled back, confused, his sword slipping from his grasp as if ripped away by unseen hands. Eirika blinked, chest heaving, his gaze fixed on the figure only he could now perceive, a woman clad in gleaming mail, silver wings arching wide, her hair a golden cascade in the sunlight breaking through the clouds. By the gods, he breathed, awe and terror mingling in his voice. What are you? The Valkyrie's pulse thundered. She was not meant to answer, not meant to reveal herself. But Odin's laws already hung shattered at her feet, and the fire in his eyes consumed her reason. I am the one who came for you, she whispered, voice low as a storm's promise. Confusion flickered across his blooded face, followed swiftly by understanding. Then I am to die this day. His words struck her harder than any spear. The truth of fate pressed heavy on her wings. She should nod, should claim his soul and lift him toward the gates of Valhalla. But instead, she found herself stepping closer, her hand trembling as she reached toward his cheek. Not if I can stop it. The vow left her lips before she could swallow it. And with it, she felt the heavens stir, the threads of fate unraveling, Odin's distant gaze turning sharp and cold. The vow hung in the air like a blade drawn against the sky, humming with power she had no right to wield. The battlefield still raged around them, steel ringing, men screaming, the ground slick with blood, but for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The mortal, Eirika, stared at her with a mixture of wonder and dread, his broad chest rising and falling as though he just faced a god instead of a man. And perhaps he had. You would defy the All-Father? His voice rasped, raw from shouting, from fighting, from breathing in the stench of war. For me. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She had no answer she could shape into words, because the truth itself was too heavy. Yes. For reasons she did not understand, for a mortal she had known for no more than the beating of a few hundred hearts, she had already chosen rebellion. Above, thunder rumbled where no storm should have been. Clouds boiled over the battlefield, dark and fast. She felt it then, Odin's gaze, cold and furious, a weight pressing upon her armor, upon her wings. She had been seen. Irika frowned, glancing toward the unnatural darkening sky. What omen is this? He wiped the blood from his brow with the back of his hand, his axe dangling at his side. Are the gods angered? Yes, she whispered, though her voice was nearly lost in the clamor. They are. A horn sounded across the field, deep and low, the kind of note that carried more than command, it carried dread. The battle slowed as warriors from both sides glanced upward, unnerved by the sudden shift in the heavens. Even the bravest tightened their grips on shield and sword, unsettled by what they did not understand. Come with me. The words escaped her before she could stop them. Her hand, delicate, armored, trembling, extended toward him. Irika looked at it, confusion etched deep into his scar-lined face. I am no coward, he said. I will not flee the field. This is not cowardice. She forced the words, though her throat burned. It is survival. Your death is fated this day, Irika, son of Halvard. But I will not let it claim you. He stared at her then, long and hard, as though measuring whether to trust a vision conjured by his own blood loss, or a goddess who had stepped down from myth to touch his world. His jaw tightened. If the Norns have spun my end, who are you to cut the thread? Her wings spread wide, silver feathers scattering glints of light across the carnage. The wind of their movement stirred the smoke, casting a brief circle of clarity around them. I am the one who carries souls to Valhalla, she said. I have borne kings and cowards, giants and berserkers, into the next world. But never have I wished to carry one away and lose him. The words cracked something inside her, and she hated how mortal it made her sound. Yet it was truth. Irika swallowed, his throat working, his eyes never leaving hers. Finally, with a sharp breath, he placed his blooded hand into hers. The weight of it sent fire through her body, real, tangible, wrong. Mortals were not meant to touch her. His touch seared her like flame, and yet she did not pull away. Lightning forked across the blackening sky. Odin's wrath. She felt it coil like a storm ready to strike. Run, she commanded. And so they did. Together. They tore across the field, slipping between warriors whose eyes could not see her but who instinctively drew back at her passing. She shielded him with her wings, her power bending spears aside, twisting arrows from their flight. The other Valkyries, her sisters, had seen. She felt their shock ripple through the air, sharp and cold. They would not move against her here, not yet, but whispers would already be racing skyward toward the Allfather. Irika's breath was ragged by the time they broke free of the clash. They reached the line of a burnt-out farmhouse, its roof collapsed and walls blackened by fire. She drew him inside, the shadows thick around them, the roar of battle dulled to a distant thunder. For the first time, silence fell between them. Irika leaned against the charred wall, his axe slipping from his hand as he pressed a palm to the gash on his arm. His eyes, so piercing, so unbearably human, fixed on her with both reverence and unease. You are no shield maiden, he said softly. No dream of a dying man. Tell me your name, goddess. Her chest tightened. Names had power. But he had already taken hers without her consent, without her will. I am called Astrid, she said at last. Her voice trembled with the weight of it. Astrid, he repeated, as though tasting the sound. His lips curved faintly, despite the blood drying on his skin. If I die today, it will not be from forgetting that name. She should have felt shame. Instead, her heart ached, pulled toward him with a force that felt older than the laws she had broken. And beyond the charred walls, the storm above them thickened, promising that the wrath of Odin was only beginning. The farmhouse groaned around them as the storm thickened, each rumble of thunder a warning from the heavens. Astrid's wings twitched restlessly, her gaze flicking toward the darkening gap in the roof as if she expected Odin himself to thrust his spear through the sky and strike them down. Eirika leaned heavily against the wall, blood seeping between his fingers. Despite his wound, there was defiance in his eyes, the same stubborn fire she had seen on the battlefield. He refused to bow, not even to fate itself. "Why me?" His voice was low, threaded with disbelief. The field was filled with men braver than I, men who died with songs on their lips. "Yet you," his jaw clenched. "You chose me." Astrid stepped closer, the wood beneath her boots whispering against the ash. She reached for him, hesitated, then let her hand hover near his cheek, close enough to feel the heat of his skin. "I did not choose," she admitted, her voice soft but fierce. "It was not choice, it was inevitability. When I saw you, I could not obey. My oath shattered in my chest." Eirika's lips quirked into a wry smile despite the blood on them. "A goddess undone by a mortal. I'll have something to boast about if I live past this day." The levity in his tone belied the grim truth, they were hunted now. Already Astrid could feel the air shifting, heavy with presence. The other Valkyries. Her sisters. They were near. She stiffened. "They come." Eirika's hand tightened around the haft of his axe, though he swayed from exhaustion. "Then we fight." "No," she spread her wings, silver feathers trembling. "You cannot fight them. They are not flesh to be cleaved. They are storms, unbound. They will take you, no matter how fiercely you swing." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Then what do you expect me to do? Hide behind you like a child?" Astrid stepped closer, her wings curling to shield them both. Her armor brushed his chest, and she felt the mortal heat of him seep into her cold immortality. "I expect you to trust me." The door burst inward with a shuddering crash. The air grew sharp with frost and lightning as 3 Valkyries strode into the ruin, their eyes glowing pale as moonlight. Their voices rose together, a harmony of thunder and judgment. Astrid. Her name on their tongues was not affection, it was accusation. "You have broken the Allfather's law," one declared, her voice echoing like a war horn. Her silver spear gleamed in the shadows. "The mortal's death was sealed, yet you intervened." Another's gaze cut to Eirika, who bared his teeth like a wolf cornered. "Release him. He is not yours to keep." Astrid's wings spread wide, their span filling the ruin with blinding light. "No," her voice trembled but did not break. "I will not surrender him." The sisters exchanged glances, their brows hardening. "Then you are no longer one of us." Eirika straightened at that, his axe lifted though his knuckles were white with fatigue. "You'll not have her." Astrid's heart wrenched at his words. Foolish mortal. Brave mortal. She stepped before him, her sword flashing into being with a sound like a star breaking. The farmhouse filled with the clash of power as steel met steel, her sisters striking with fury. Sparks rained like meteors, feathers scattered like falling snow. Eirika fought at her back, his axe biting into the haft of a Valkyrie's spear, though the force nearly drove him to his knees. She whirled, parried, struck, her every movement fueled by something she had never felt before, desperation. Not for herself. For him. The eldest of her sisters raised her hand, and lightning cracked through the roof, striking inches from Eirika's feet. He stumbled, the smell of singed earth rising around them. "Enough," the eldest thundered. "Astrid, surrender. Odin's wrath already gathers. Defy him further, and not even your wings will be spared." Astrid's breath came fast, her hair plastered to her cheek, her armor dented. She met her sister's gaze, fierce and unyielding. "Then let them take my wings. Let them cast me down. I will not let him die." Eirika's eyes widened at her words, his hand brushing her shoulder as if to steady both her and himself. The air shivered, heavy and vast. The clash of blades halted as the very walls of the world seemed to bend. From above, a voice rolled down like thunder over mountains. Astrid. Odin's voice. It filled every crack of the ruin, every vein of the earth, every beat of her heart. Her knees nearly buckled beneath its weight. "You would cast aside your sisters, your duty, your eternity, for one mortal life." Her lips trembled, but she forced them steady. She turned her face upward, defiant despite the terror that clawed at her bones. "Yes. Silence followed, deep and terrible. Then came the roar of fury, shaking the farmhouse to its foundations. Her sisters stepped back, fear flashing across their perfect faces. Irika caught her arm, gripping tight as debris rained from the ceiling. Astrid. Light engulfed them, searing, endless. She felt her wings tear as though ripped by unseen hands, agony lancing through her body. Her scream split the storm as feathers turned to ash. And when the light faded, Astrid collapsed into the mortal's arms. Her wings were gone. Astrid gasped as the last of the searing light faded, her body shuddering with pain that pierced deeper than any blade. Her wings, the proud, radiant span of feathers that had carried her through countless battles, that had brushed the edge of Asgard's gates, were gone. Torn from her. All that remained were jagged scars seared into her shoulder blades, raw and burning. She sagged against Irika, breath ragged, her silver armor dimming as if the divine light had been stripped from it too. Astrid, his voice was hoarse, panicked. He pulled her closer, steadying her weight with arms that had carried shields and comrades but never a fallen goddess. His rough hand cradled the back of her head, tangled in her golden hair. "You're bleeding. Gods, you're bleeding like one of us." She lifted her head, her eyes dazed but fierce. "Not like one of you. Now I am one of you." The words sank heavy between them. He stared at her, his jaw tightening. Outside, the storm rumbled on, Odin's fury echoing across the skies, but the Valkyries were gone. Her sisters had vanished into the clouds, unwilling or perhaps unable to finish what had been decreed. The All-Father had already passed judgment. Astrid was cast down. Irika held her as if he feared she might slip away. "Why? Why would you do this?" His voice cracked with the question. "You had eternity. You had power no scald could put to words. And you threw it all into the fire. For me." Her hand trembled as she lifted it to his cheek, her palm warm despite the sting in her body. His stubble scratched her skin, achingly mortal. "Because eternity means nothing if it is empty. Because I saw you, and for the first time, I felt alive." The confession tore her open as much as her wounds had. She expected shame. Instead, there was only release. Irika's lips parted, but no words came. He looked at her as though she were both madness and miracle, something too great for him to hold yet already pressed into his arms. The farmhouse groaned under the weight of the storm. A beam collapsed with a crash, embers sparking. The god's wrath was not done. Odin had not slain her, but neither would he forgive her. "We must leave," she whispered, her voice faint but urgent. "His gaze still hunts us." Irika nodded, shifting her weight so she leaned against him. He was strong, but she could feel the tremor in his arms, the exhaustion in his body. Still, he bore her without hesitation. With each step over ash and splintered wood, she marveled at him not as the warrior she had first seen, but as a man. Flawed. Mortal. Yet stronger than any she had ever known. They staggered out into the storm-swept fields. The battle had ended in chaos, warriors scattered, corpses strewn like broken dolls. The ravens circled above, feasting, watching. She shuddered. Once, they had been her kin, Odin's spies, his heralds. Now their beady eyes followed her as if marking prey. Irika spat into the dirt, glaring up at them. "Let him watch," he growled. "I will not bow." Astrid felt a faint smile tug at her lips despite the agony. Reckless man. He glanced at her, his teeth flashing in a grin that was half defiance, half tenderness. "And yet you are here." They pressed on, stumbling toward the tree line that bordered the battlefield. Each step was a war for him, his wounds bleeding, his breath ragged. Each step was agony for her, the raw absence of her wings screaming with every movement. Yet they did not stop. By the time the trees swallowed them, dusk had begun to fall. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, and the distant thunder eased into a low growl. Irika lowered her gently against the base of an oak, his chest heaving. He tore a strip of cloth from his tunic, pressing it against her wounds with careful, calloused hands. Astrid hissed, clutching his wrist. "You need tending more than I." He shook his head. "You bled for me. I'll not have you suffer for it." For a moment, The world shrank to just the two of them, the rough brush of his fingers, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body close to hers. She was Valkyrie no longer. She was flesh and blood, fragile and finite. And in that fragility, she felt something vast and terrifying, belonging. Eirika finally leaned back, his blue eyes dark in the fading light. "What now?" he asked quietly. "Odin will not forget. Your sisters will not forgive." Astrid turned her gaze skyward, though the canopy of trees hid the storm. The weight of exile pressed upon her, heavier than her broken armor. "Now," she said, her voice soft but certain, "we live. As long as we are able, we live. Together." He was silent for a long moment. Then, with a gentleness that shook her, he took her hand in his. "For as long as we are able," he echoed. And beneath the darkening sky, where the god's gaze could not pierce, their fingers entwined, the touch of mortal and fallen Valkyrie sealing a bond both forbidden and unbreakable. The forest wrapped around them like a cloak of shadows, the last light of dusk fading into the hush of night. The storm above had rolled westward, but Astrid knew Odin's eye had not left her. He would not let go so easily, not when one of his chosen had fallen from the heavens for a mortal's sake. Eirika coaxed a small fire to life with trembling hands, his breath sharp with exhaustion. The flames flickered weakly, struggling against the damp air, but the glow lit his face, broad, scarred, weathered by years of raids and winters. He looked nothing like the shining heroes Astrid had carried to Valhalla. He looked real. And he looked at her as though she were the last miracle left in the world. Astrid shifted, biting back a cry as the motion pulled at her raw wounds. Eirika was at her side in an instant, his calloused hand steadying her shoulder. "Careful," he murmured. "The gods have taken enough from you without you tearing yourself apart." She caught his wrist before he could pull away, her fingers trembling as they closed around his. For centuries she had touched mortals only in death, guiding their spirits skyward. Their flesh had been ghostlight beneath her hands, fleeting and unreal. But his skin, warm, rough, alive, anchored her. "You speak as if I regret what I have lost," she whispered, her voice unsteady. Eirika frowned, crouching lower so their eyes met. "Do you not? You were untouchable. Eternal. Now you bleed like me." His gaze flicked to the blood-stained bandages wrapped across her shoulders, his jaw tightening. "You hurt like me. And one day, you will die like me." A silence stretched between them, the crackle of the fire filling the space. Astrid's throat ached. She thought of her sisters soaring through endless skies, their laughter like steel and song, their wings glinting in the sunlight above Asgard's halls. She thought of the shimmering gates of Valhalla, of the warriors she had carried there, men who had met her with awe and reverence, not love. "I regret nothing," she said at last. Her voice was soft, but the certainty in it was steel. "What is eternity without meaning? What is power without a heart to share it with? The moment I saw you, Eirika, I understood. I was never alive until I chose to fall." His breath caught, his hand tightening in hers. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, as though afraid the world might shatter if he pressed too hard, he leaned forward. His forehead touched hers, their breaths mingling in the firelight. "You are madness," he whispered. "Madness, to trade eternity for a man who may not see another winter." Astrid's lips curved faintly. "Then let me be mad. I would rather have one lifetime with you than 1,000 lifetimes without." His answer was not words, but the rough, desperate press of his mouth against hers. It was not the kiss of a scald's tale, no gentle poetry, no divine perfection. It was hungry, mortal, raw. And yet to her, it was more sacred than any hymn she had ever heard in Odin's hall. When they parted, his hands lingered against her jaw, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones as though to assure himself she was real. "We must move on the morrow," he said hoarsely. "The gods will not stop hunting you. Or me." Astrid nodded, though her body sagged with exhaustion. "Where will we go?" Eirika's gaze drifted toward the north, where the stars began to pierce the tree line. "Beyond the fjords. There are places where even Odin's ravens grow wary. Hidden valleys. Caverns where the god's gaze does not reach. If we can find one," he trailed off, as though the thought of sanctuary was too fragile to put fully into words. She studied him in the flickering firelight, the determination in his face, the quiet fear hidden beneath it. He was mortal, yes. But he was also unyielding. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could lead her through this world she had never truly walked as one of its own. Astrid leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. His arm came around her instinctively, pulling her close, his warmth sinking into her bones. For the first time in centuries, she felt not the weight of duty, not the chains of divine law, but the fragile, precious comfort of belonging. Outside the circle of firelight, the forest stirred. Branches cracked softly in the distance. Astrid's eyes snapped open, her muscles tense despite her exhaustion. She knew that sound. Not animal. Not human. Irika's hand found his axe. They've found us. Astrid's pulse quickened, her fingers brushing the hilt of her sword. But when the shadows moved at the edge of the trees, it was not the silver gleam of Valkyrie wings that emerged. It was something darker. Something older. A figure cloaked in black stepped into the firelight, its face hidden beneath a hood. The air grew colder, heavier, thick with a presence that made Astrid's skin crawl. She knew instantly what it was, not her sisters, not Odin's chosen, but one of the Norns. The weavers of fate. The hooded figure tilted its head, and though its face remained hidden, its voice was clear and sharp as the snapping of a thread. You have unraveled what was bound. And now the weave must be rewoven. Astrid's blood turned to ice. Irika stepped in front of her without hesitation, his axe raised. You'll not touch her. The Norn's laugh was soft, mocking. Foolish mortal. You were never meant to stand beyond this night. And she, the figure, pointed a pale hand at Astrid. She was never meant to love. Her lips parted as if she might protest, but no words came. The mortal was looking at her, not through her, not with the stunned confusion mortals usually carried when glimpsing the divine, but with raw, unshaken certainty. He believed what he saw, and in that moment, she felt her immortality tremble. You are not a spirit, he said finally, his voice rough but steady. You bleed warmth. Your eyes hold storms. And yet, you stand where no shield maiden should. Tell me, are you my doom or my salvation? The air between them quivered, thick with the clash of fate and longing. She should have vanished then, slipped back into the veil between worlds. To stay was to risk everything. But she did not leave. Instead, her feet rooted to the earth, wings half folded, silver feathers catching the firelight. I am neither, she whispered. Her voice was softer than she had ever heard it, almost fragile. I am sworn to the All-Father, to carry the fallen to Valhalla. Your death, it is written. A harsh laugh escaped him, though it carried no mockery. Written, he said, lifting his scarred hand toward the starless sky. Then let the gods dip their quill again. I've yet to yield. His defiance lit something inside her, something reckless and dangerous. She had seen countless men boast before their deaths, but his words carried no hollow bravado. He truly believed he could defy fate, and that belief pierced her like no blade ever had. Do you not fear me? She asked, almost against her will. You see what I am. A Valkyrie. You know what it means. He took a step closer, and though the distance between them remained, she felt the ground tilt. I should fear you, he admitted, voice low. But I do not. If you have come to claim me, then so be it. If you have come for more, then I welcome it. Her breath caught. A mortal, offering himself not as a soul to be guided, but as a man daring to stand before her unshaken. Her wings flexed, trembling, betraying her turmoil. Do not speak such things, she said, her tone laced with warning but faltering at the edges. Love between mortal and Valkyrie is forbidden. Odin's wrath is swift. He smiled, faint but fierce. Then let him strike me first. If I must die, let it be for something worth dying for. The words pierced deeper than any sword. She should have turned away, should have vanished back into the shadows before dawn revealed her trespass. But instead, she felt her hand lift, almost without thought, and hover inches from his cheek. The warmth of his skin pulled at her like gravity, and for the first time in her eternal life, she feared her own heart more than any god's decree. Somewhere in the night, a raven cried. A warning. A promise. And still, she did not move her hand. Her hand brushed his cheek. Just a breath of contact, but it was enough to send a tremor through her entire being. His skin was warm, so very warm, and in that fleeting touch she felt everything that separated her from him, his mortality, his fragility, his fire. The fire she was about to extinguish if she obeyed her oath. He closed his eyes briefly, as if memorizing the sensation. When his gaze returned to her, it carried no fear, only a steady resolve that made her wings falter. "You should not touch me," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of her own words. "Perhaps," he replied, "but I do not regret it." The honesty in his tone made her chest ache. How could a mortal's truth feel sharper than a god's decree? She pulled her hand back, fingers trembling, but the memory of his warmth lingered as though seared into her flesh. The night was thinning. Already, the horizon bled with the faintest suggestion of dawn, and with it, the danger of being seen. Her sisters would rise soon, scouring battlefields for the fallen. If they found her here, lingering not as a guide but as a woman, suspicion would spread like wildfire. "I must go," she said, wings unfurling with a rush of silver light. "Will I see you again?" His voice carried something almost boyish beneath its strength, a plea wrapped in armor. Her heart staggered at the question. She should have answered no. She should have left him with nothing but a fading vision. Instead, her lips parted with a truth she could not cage. Yes. And then she was gone, vanishing into the veil, though her soul remained tethered to the earth she had just abandoned. Days passed, though she felt each one like a century. The halls of the Valkyries rang with song, laughter, and the clash of practice blades, but she moved through them in silence, her thoughts chained to a mortal she should not think of. Her sisters noticed. They always noticed. One, a sharp-eyed warrior named Bringer, caught her lingering at the edge of the clouds one evening and smirked. "Your gaze has turned heavy of late," Bringer said, tossing her golden braid over her shoulder. "Have you found a mortal worth watching?" The Valkyrie stiffened. "I watch as we all do. Nothing more." Bringer laughed, rich and merciless. "Be careful, sister. Mortals are fleeting. Their lives are sparks, bright and gone. Better not to warm your hands on a fire that cannot last." She forced herself to smile, but the words dug deep. That night, she returned to the mortal world, unable to resist the pull. He was there, as though waiting, seated by the riverbank with an axe across his knees. The moon painted his face in pale silver, softening the harshness of his scars. "You came," he said simply, and for the first time in centuries, she felt her heart truly race. The riverbank meetings became their sanctuary. At first, there were only words, her listening as he spoke of battles, of winters survived, of dreams of a hall he would never see. But words soon gave way to touches, a brush of her fingers against his hand, the whisper of his breath against her ear when he leaned too close. And then, one night, the restraint shattered. Beneath the canopy of stars, he kissed her, gentle at first, reverent, as though he feared she would vanish if he pressed too hard. But when she did not pull away, when her hands clutched his shoulders as though anchoring herself to the mortal world, his kiss deepened, fierce with longing. For the first time in eternity, she felt alive. Yet their fire could not burn unseen forever. Odin's whispers stirred in the halls of Asgard. The All-Father's one-eyed gaze was said to pierce every shadow, and she felt it often, like a cold hand clutching her throat. Her sisters grew restless too, Bringer most of all, whose sharp eyes and sharper instincts missed nothing. One night, as she descended again to meet him, a raven followed, its cry splitting the darkness. She knew it was no ordinary bird. It was Odin's. And still, she went. He was waiting, axe in hand, but when he saw her wings emerge from the mist, his expression softened into something no battlefield could carve away. "I knew you'd come," he said, relief thick in his voice. But before she could answer, the air cracked open. A storm of light tore the sky apart, and 3 Valkyries descended in a spiral of silver fire, Bringer among them. "Sister," Bringer's voice thundered, "you have broken your oath." Her gaze cut to the mortal, then back to her, blazing with both fury and betrayal. "You have lain your hand upon one fated to die. Do you think Odin blind? Do you think us deaf?" The mortal stepped forward, standing between them, axe raised though his hand trembled. "If you want her, you'll have to pass through me." "Foolish man," Brynja sneered. You think you can challenge us? You were marked for death long before her love cursed you further. Then let me choose my death, he roared, lunging forward with all the reckless courage that had first drawn her to him. His axe met Brynja's spear, sparks flying in the night. For a heartbeat, he held mortal strength against divine steel, but only for a heartbeat. The spear drove through his chest, clean and merciless. His cry broke the silence, and blood painted the grass beneath them. No. The Valkyrie screamed, wings flaring wide as she rushed to him. She caught him as he fell, his weight warm and heavy in her arms. His eyes, dimming now, still sought hers. You were worth it, he whispered, blood at his lips but a faint smile on his face. Worth defying gods. Tears, real tears, burned down her immortal cheeks. Stay with me, she begged, knowing the futility but powerless against the plea clawing its way out of her soul. Brynja's voice was colder than steel. You shame us all. Let him go, and perhaps Odin will show mercy. But she did not let go. She clutched him tighter, wings folding around his body as though she could shield him from death itself. His last breath slipped into the night, warm against her neck, and then he was gone. Silence fell. The other Valkyries lowered their weapons, but their eyes were filled with judgment. Brynja's was the harshest of all. You have chosen your path, she said. May the Allfather's punishment match your folly. The Valkyrie looked down at the lifeless mortal in her arms. Something inside her broke and something else ignited. She lifted her gaze, no longer trembling, no longer pleading. Her voice cut through the night like a blade. Then let Odin come. The night air shuddered with the echo of her defiance. The other Valkyries exchanged wary glances, as if her words alone might summon the wrath of the Allfather. Brynja tightened her grip on her spear, but she did not strike again. Instead, she spoke with the weight of a death sentence. You dare challenge him? You dare spit upon the law of the gods? Her wings curved tighter around the fallen man in her arms, a cocoon of silver feathers drenched with mortal blood. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with fury. I dare, because I loved him. Because he was more than a soul to be ferried, more than a mark in your ledger of the dead. He was mine. The ground trembled. The sky cracked open with lightning. Odin's presence descended like a storm, unseen yet suffocating, pressing against their bones. His voice rolled through the night, vast and merciless. Valkyrie. She flinched, clutching the body closer, her heart thundering against her ribs. You were born to serve. To carry the worthy to my hall. You were not born to love. His voice was cold thunder, sharp as iron. You have broken the first law. You have meddled with fate. Her teeth clenched. Then your laws are cruel. Silence answered at first, an abyss so deep even the other Valkyries dared not breathe. Then came the fury. You would defy me. Odin roared, his voice shaking the very stars. For a mortal whose bones rot even now in your arms? Yes, she whispered, the single word carrying more strength than all her centuries of obedience. The storm split wider. Ravens poured from the darkness, their wings blotting the sky, their cries sharp and damning. The other Valkyries fell to their knees, heads bowed. Only she remained standing, clutching the man she loved. Odin's judgment fell. Then you are no longer of my hall. Stripped of my blessing, stripped of immortality, stripped of sisterhood, you are cast down. Pain ripped through her like fire. Her wings burned, feathers blackening and falling as ash to the ground. Her strength drained, her breath caught, and for the first time in eternity she felt mortal. She fell to her knees, gasping, clutching the lifeless body all the harder. Brynja rose slowly, her face torn between triumph and sorrow. She had wanted her sister punished, but even she had not expected this. You are nothing now, she said softly. Not Valkyrie, not goddess. Only a woman. The banished one raised her head. Tears carved tracks down her cheeks, but behind them burned something fiercer than divine fire. Then I will be a woman, she said, voice raw but unbroken. And I will remember him. Even if the gods forget. The storm receded, Odin's presence withdrawing, but the weight of exile clung to her shoulders. The other Valkyries turned away, wings unfurled, leaving her in the ruin of what had been. Alone. Mortal. cradling the man she had defied the heavens for. She pressed her lips to his brow, the last kiss of a Valkyrie who no longer was, and whispered against his skin, "Your sacrifice will not be in vain." The wind carried her vow into the dark, a spark of rebellion against eternity itself.